we are honored to host the 5th LC Jain Memorial Lecture, like we have done in some previous years, and we feel very, very grateful for this opportunity. For this evening, as the speaker for this evening, we have Dr. Matthew Thomas Isaac, who wears many hats, but I would begin by saying that he is foremost an academic, and he is an economist and an author, and he is also a politician. ADR usually stays away from politicians, but we have made an exception deliberately because we thought, and the LC Jain family thought, that on an issue like challenge of federalism, negotiating center-state tensions, he perhaps is the most informed person in this country, having been in the thick of it for many, many years. So we decided to invite him, and we are happy we did that. Just to explain why I began that he is an academic, he did his MPhil from the Jawaharlal University, which some people may not want to be known at this time. And he did a PhD at the Center for Development Studies. And for his PhD, he worked on class struggle and industrial structure, a study of the coal weaving industry in Kerala, 1859 to 1980. So he's been involved with the struggle of people almost from day one. Of course, that also made him join the Students' Federation of India, with which he's been linked for a long time, and then he graduated into the Communist Party Marxist. He has been the Finance Minister of Kerala, for which he is most widely known. He has written several books in Malayalam and in English, and he continues to, in my humble opinion, an academic foremost than anything else. So I will now invite Dr. Matthew to deliver his talk. Dr. Isaac, sorry. Dr. Matthew is also here. You should not be sitting in front.
Honorable Justice Thakur, Professor Jagdeep, and dear LC Jain, colleagues and friends. Professor Mukherjee and Madam Mukherjee are here. We at Center for Development Studies have very fond memories of frequent visits of LC Jain and LC Jain to Tirunelveli. And invariably they would be staying with Professor Raj. So at that time, CDS was also very much involved in discussions on appropriate technology. He had Lori Becker, then CJ Reddy used to come. So I think these themes which were very dear to LCJ was also shared by many there. So apart from the friendship with Raj from Delhi days, I think there was also some themes on which work could be done together. Well, I have changed the topic slightly. I have added Indian federalism, negotiating the tensions between center, state, and local governments. Now to speak about the tensions in federalism, about local governments, particularly when you are delivering a lecture in honor of LC Jain, I thought, yes, good. One of the most memorable discussions I had with LC Jain was in 1996. We were implementing People's Plan campaign for decentralization. Normally, decentralization is a reform from above. devolving power down. Instead of administrative reform from above, we launched a huge mass campaign from below to empower the local governments. So it's a very unique experiment. And surely LC Jain did come and sat with long hours discussing. I remember he was so excited about one thing that we were doing resource mapping in some villages. So he recalled in 1929, TS Thakur's an economic survey of Matar Taluka and said this has been done earlier by Kumarappa. You are really rediscovering him and so on and so forth. See, this was something very close to his heart. So vision of federalism was much wider and deeper for LC Jain. It was not confined to center-state relations. His main concern was the relation between center and state to local governments. Our nationhood was forged in the national movement, struggle for independence. National movement accepted the diversity of India and its organization reflected, say, the languages in India. The PCCs were organized on language basis. And for Gandhiji, Gram Swaraj was the ultimate meaning of independence. So, but finally, when Constitution was drawn up, we are having the meeting in Constitution Club. I learned that this was the club of the members of the Constitutional Assembly. Then, two things surprised me. We were quasi-federal. Power was concentrated at the center, reflecting the atmosphere of the post-partition period. Everybody wanted to have a strong center. And greatest surprise was the local governments were relegated to the directive principles of the Constitution. It was not in the Constitution at all. Now, LC Jain discovered Gandhiji and the local governments not in his student days, when he was a participant in the Quit India movement, but in the refugee camps of post-partition time. And he has this fantastic book, City of Hope, on Federalism. Not that he studied Gandhiji and then, but he discovered Gandhiji in his actions. It's essentially a community involvement in education, healthcare, and setting up of cooperatives for handicrafts and so on for the refugee population there. And he has documented it here. But it is sniffed out. Okay. City of Hope was not realized. Bureaucratic interference and so on. So, but anyway, this discovery had a permanent impact on his thinking. His first academic article, I think, I found, is 1962 piece on cooperatives and local governments. The Indian administrative journal. Now, I mentioned this because this was the time of Balwant Rai Committee. Everybody, that was the first generation panchayats were being set up. He is critical of that. What is his criticism? Balwant Rai Mehta looks at it as institutions for development. But to him, the Gandhian vision of a self-governing unit, that was what was more important. And why does he insist on self-government as a self-governing unit? Because only then there would be a creative linkage with cooperatives. If you are a development institution, well, cooperative is also a development institution. So, if you want to link the two, he said, units of self-government, cooperatives become a part of a wider question of relationship between government and cooperatives. Therefore, I'm quoting, it is therefore essential that panchayats are unambiguously declared to be and treated as units of government in the interest of harmony and coordination between them and the cooperatives. And he, at that time, very interesting, now you have a centralization, you have a cooperative ministry in the center, and fortunately, Supreme Court. Otherwise, cooperatives would have been part of the central ministry. But he wanted, you know what, the Jilla Panchayats should be the regulatory mechanisms, not the state governments. So it's a very interesting argument that he makes in this paper. Now what happens after independence? You have centralization tendencies asserting. Particularly with the Green Revolution coming, it's a centralized strategy. Agriculture, after all, is the, I think, domain of the local government locality. That's that Gandhian vision of Taluka survey is about. But Green Revolution is just the opposite, they're centralized approaches. So there was a lot of tension coming up. And tension, particularly with the coming of the non-Congress governments. First in Kerala, then by 1967 it has become generalized, and tensions were very evident. And the mediation took place through two commissions. One was Sarkaria Commission which came, and the other was Ashwamedha Committee. And the Sarkaria Commission was very exhaustive report that has produced, but his impact has been very little. It was followed up. Because by then, more centralized schemes were coming in the domains of state and local governments. You have all very big Adavo and poverty alleviation programs and so on, which were ideal for decentralized state level, local level development process, but it was getting more and more centralized, and therefore it's not surprising that Sarkaria Commission was not very much attended to. Ashwamedha Commission had a little more, I think, better reception. It gave rise to the second generation local governments in India. You had the best would be Karnataka. They had a government initiated an experiment in particularly district governance. And K.S. Krishnaswamy has done a fantastic study with LC Jain very elaborately quotes in his paper on 1989 paper, which he published in EPW. So, yeah. So, there, in that sense, he is so elated that he points out that decentralization in Karnataka had a fantastic impact on education, healthcare. I think your association came later, after 73, 74. LC Jain was instrumental in setting up the first association of PRI representatives in Karnataka. But that came after 73, 74. And so, something fantastic. This is a time that the experiment in Bengal started with decentralization. Kerala also pitched in by a district administration bill in 1989. So, but all this came to naught. Bengal survived, but Karnataka was sniffed out after when new Congress government came. Kerala district administration also came to an end with the new Congress government. As usual, coming up, we fluctuate, except for this is an exception that Kerala government is continuously off second term. I think it's quite democratic. So, but that has this problem also. There will be some problems continue to your policy. Now, this made everybody realize if you want to, that the decentralization should not be discretionary. You do something that somebody else does that. So, we need a constitutional change. It has to become part of the constitutions. So, this is the background. And the background, let me say, the instrument was the person who took lead was Rajiv Gandhi. Very unlike of what people thought of Rajiv Gandhi. This is the technology man, technology missions and so on. In an article, an essay, LC Jain tries to understand why, how Rajiv Gandhi came to this decentralization conclusion. So he started in 1987 a series of workshops in various bureaucrats. And he says, a band of young bureaucrats took this occasion to impress upon Rajiv Gandhi that you need to do something rather than just making efficiency. You spend 1 rupee, only, this is famous statement, 35 paisa reaches the actual person. So you need to have a change. And thus 64, 65 constitutional amendment. But then it gave rise to serious problem. Why? This is pointed to why EMS Nagpuri thought. It is not a dissent to Ashok Mehta committee report. So EMS decentralization is not just from state to local government. It also a movement decentralization from center to state. The principle of subsidiarity starts from the local government. But then, what is center's role? Whatever that can be done at state level should be given to states. Only residual will go to center. So, EMS had pointed out, that isn't the Ashok Mehta, you are not going to reach the unless you give more power to states. Now, 64, 65 constitutional amendment had this problem. There's some better attention there. What was the problem? The center was reaching out to the local governments directly, as Central Election Commission and collectors many out. So there was a huge suspicion coming out. But this was a very clever ploy to undermine the states. You have center and you have the local governments, and states now have a lot of power. So you have the big debates in the parliament and so on, why these not possible. But Narasimha Rao is much more negotiator. So he brokered an agreement on that. And somebody, we should read some of the people who were involved in writing about it, Meenakshi Sundaram particularly. How it was discussed with various people, changes made and so on. Finally, we have 73rd, 74th Constitutional Amendment, and so you have the third generation of local governments coming up. It's at that time that he visited Kerala, and we had the long conversation I referred to. Now, what has happened since then? Well, the enthusiasm was there. 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment, there are a lot of people who really believe that's going to transform India, change India. You can find that enthusiasm now only in Manish Shankaraya. He is a diehard all time, still keeps at it. Some runners like that. Even LC Jain, in his EPW article, he says how he quotes from 11th Finance Commission, which made the first award. That states were not moving because states had to pass now conformity legislation. It was left to states to determine what powers to give, how much money to give, and they were very stingy. So things were not moving. By the time the 20th anniversary of 73rd 74th Constitutional Amendment came, finally Manish Shankaraya was head of a committee to look in what has to be done. Nobody, I think, looked at the report and concluded. So the laborious work, really 4 or 5 volumes. And then, finally, when 25th anniversary came, a meeting was held only there. People have nationed the country have virtually forgotten the 73rd, 74th Constitutional Amendment. And best treatment would be the book that LC Jain edited in John Matthew's honor. Decentralization and governance, local governance. But it's very interesting, the introduction to the book. Of course, the articles are focused upon the functioning of the panchayat. But his interest is how did this devolution, affirmative action, how did it affect the women, empower women and girls? I must say I was honored by exhaustive quotes from the paper I contributed. It was on women elected representatives. So you find LC Jain still very positive. Okay? He don't give up. The hope is still there. But country is forgetting what is our goal. So why did it happen? I think neoliberal reform phase is the worst time to introduce decentralization. Not that neoliberalism per se is against decentralization. In fact, you have the World Bank, which is the big votary of decentralization. Every structural adjustment program that third world countries had a decentralization component. So, ultimate decentralized system is a market system. So, to reach that system, devolution was an intermediate stage to the World Bank. But in the process, decentralization got abandoned. Because it all came with structural adjustment program. So you find that we did an exercise in the Google counter of reference to devolution. Very interesting to see. It peaks in 2000, 2001, 2, then comes down. Worldwide, there's a descent channel. Because impact people will see their life going down, particularly in America and so on, because structural adjustment. And along with that, decline comes in decentralization. This neoliberal period, last 30 years, also saw very direct inroads into states' fiscal and other autonomies. A major problem with Indian federal structure is that financial powers are concentrated in the centers. But there is a constitutional mechanism of finance commission which will determine how much resources may be transferred to local government, to state governments. But you find, say 1951, at independence time, the pre-devolution gap was only 2.41% of GDP. Now it's 10.1. Even after devolution, you find the gap widening from 1.95 in 50-51 to 6.16 in 15-16. Major change that came during this period was the FRBM Act. FRBM Act creates certain rules for the government, how much to spend. So, whatever you may promise to the people, etc., when you come, you have to obey this. And what are the rules? Rule is that no borrowed money can be spent on current expenditure. There is an intergenerational equity involved, therefore that's not possible. Secondly, how much you can borrow is limited to 3% of the GDP. It's a very hard constraint on the government. Why do you do these particular numbers? There's nothing, absolutely nothing in economic theory which says 3% is the magic number. Because European Union, when they made the stabilization pact, they chose these numbers for their wisdom, and we have followed it here. The major criticism against this is asymmetry in its implementation. Central government now keeps it. There has not been a single year when the central government is abided by the FRBM. If you take the period from 2005-06, you will find the revenue deficit of the center fluctuated between 2% and 4.5% of the GDP. While states, during the last one decade, it has been zero. Of course, there are states like outliers like Kerala who are very serious revenue deficit. My argument always has been that we consider expenditure on human resources, human capital development. So education will not be considered as revenue expenditure. It will be a capital expenditure, which is paying Kerala very good dividends here. A whole lot of people, because we invested in human resources, were able to get employment outside, and the money they sent to Kerala constitutes something like 30-35% of Kerala's GDP. That's it. So rightfully, I think it should be considered as part of the capital investment, but still, if you take the states as a whole, it's zero. No, states do terrible things to keep the root. They might have borrowed money with them, but they must spend on revenue. Do you know the COVID period, when I became first minister, the first article I wrote is, why do the states not spend? They were spending. Look at Bihar, Orissa, Rajasthan, UP. There are schools, hospitals, and so on. Not because they don't have money, but they won't spend because it's lesser rule. You cannot spend your borrowed money on current expenditure. Most nauseating instance was the COVID. The COVID, the state governments had 1.5 lakh crores of rupees lying idle in the treasury. Central government allowed 5% borrowing, from 3% increased to 5%. Many states didn't borrow full. Kerala is the only state that borrowed to hit all the 5%. But some states borrowed, and then they wouldn't want to break this rule. Therefore, you have a situation in COVID time when people lack food, going hungry, without health care, or even money to meet the expenses of funeral part. You have a situation 1.5 lakh crores lying in the treasury, borrowed at 7%. That is the rate of interest at that time, 7%. And what does the Reserve Bank do? The money is lying idle in your treasury, the surplus. They will take it and invest in government of India securities. States also like it. If it lies in your treasury, you don't get any interest. If you put in government of India securities, you get 2.5% at that time. So you borrow and lend to India government at 2.5. So you have internalized mechanically this rule that you wouldn't spend. That's why the answer given. Why do the states not spend? So government of India never follows that. And then you have fiscal deficit. How much borrowing? You are not supposed to borrow more than 3% of the GDP. Indian government has never complied with it. Say, it's from 2005-06, central government fiscal deficit has fluctuated with all window dressings there from 3.5 to 6%. 3.5 to 6%. So this is a basic asymmetry. No rule or law the center need to comply, but states are forced to. And now a big fight has started between states and centers. Both center and states, particularly states like Kerala, borrow outside the budget, but you won't bring it into the budget. See, Kerala is very deficit in very good schools and hospitals and so on, but those who have traveled in Kerala will understand. Move at half the speed of national motorways because the roads are so bad. Like that, infrastructure is very poor. Why is it poor? We pursued a path of development different from the rest of India. We invested in education, healthcare, etc. done well. But now, Kerala needs to have something else in the infrastructure. So Kerala has created an institution called KIFBI, which will borrow from the market and use. You say KIFBI is a body corporate. Where all these contractors, big corporates which undertake infrastructure for government of India, where do they get the money from? They borrow from the bank. Here it is not government, we comply with the law, but the government body corporate would borrow. What is the macroeconomic impact difference between the two? Nothing. So now government of India is saying, all this borrowing will be counted as a normal borrowing, which means state will be denied normal borrowing, which means that fiscal disaster. Government will come to standstill. Why government of India merely borrows? In 2019-20, CAG report says, government of India borrowed, how much? 3.5 lakh crores of rupees extra budgetary borrowing admitted. In the budget speeches, the finance minister has agreed to 1.75 lakh crores. And CAG says, no, they have borrowed 1.5 more, and 3.25 lakh crores of rupees. Nobody wants to be included in the fiscal deficit of the central government. It's not considered part of the normal borrowing. But center wants to discipline the state governments. So all sorts of stuff are made. Suddenly, RBI comes out with a statement that, well, if states go like that, they will reach the state of Sri Lanka. What the hell here? Sri Lanka is a foreign state crisis. Can any state reach a foreign state crisis? It's not borrowed from outside, from within India. It's a kind of frightening the whole population. And you have, luckily, I would say, COVID saved the states. You should read 15th Finance Commission terms of reference. I was speaking to Sita about that. She edited it. So she see, what agenda was set for 15th Finance Commission to drastically squeeze the fiscal space for the states. Constitution says, after devolution is made, the Finance Commission will consider if some extra money, revenue deficit grant can be given. The first reference is, if this revenue deficit grant should be continued at all. Can you imagine somebody writing like this in terms of reference to a constitutional body? Something against the constitution, this body has no right to decide whether it should be revenue deficit grant or not. It's part of the constitution. N.K. Singh was the chairman of the FRBN review committee, and he came up with a report that states borrowing will be reduced from 3% to 1.75%. Fiscal stability. It's laughable here. That's why I said COVID is the last time when you have a recession to speak about curtailing the borrowing power and so on, and therefore all this have been given by a whole series of recommendations and terms of reference had to be given up. So you look at all the freebie debate. Of course, they cannot just spend you all the money, just freebies to everybody for what outcome. But states can't do it. There is this FRBM Act saying that you cannot spend your borrowed money on any expenditure. So you cannot go beyond the limit to give a freebie. See, there's already a limit. Then why do you break this up? And who breaks it up? Government of India, which has written off 10.5 lakh crores of rupees corporate debt. Of it, they can collect only 1.35 lakh crores. Somebody who would reduce the corporate rate tax from 35 to 25. Every year, 1.5 lakh crores is given to the corporate. When Government of India is on a revenue deficit, you are giving up the revenues. You have production-linked incentives coming up now. You produce, you are given freebie. So this suddenly central government is trying to discipline the states. The freebies, what? And everybody speaks about how we are impoverishing the future generation, intergenerational equity, and so on and so forth. When you are borrowing and investing in infrastructure, the future generation, they let you pay it back, but they also get the assets. The asset created by borrowing, they also inherit it. So you look at this. Every debate I can go on, the fiscal. States are being squeezed. You have GST. Now GST it can have some federal flexibility. There is interstate trade, IGST, central tax, which is CGST, and state tax on intrastate movement traffic, that is SGST. See, when the calamity, the flood scheme, Kerala requested and was permitted to have a 1% cess on SGST. Nothing happened to the architecture of GST. See, you can give a federal flexibility by permitting the states. Okay, they want to run more schools, they don't want to break the FRBM Act, they should. Those who don't want to do it, don't do it. But even that federal flexibility is not there. Now, because of various implementation problems, the revenues have been on point. Suddenly, from this year, the compensation stops. What is there here? Compensation is not coming from center. It is a tax collected from singles, like tobacco products and so on, some luxury products and so on. You can continue that for the 2 years. So the whole kind of, earlier there was some negotiations. Now there is no negotiation. You pass laws on which, for example, 3 agrarian units. Agriculture is state subject. Has states been consulted in time? And what is the motive? We have to have a second green revolution. Now, the first green revolution, the agency, extension agency, was the government. Now, with the minimum government cannot do this nationwide extension work and so. So who will do? Corporates. The National Bank, they have got now agreement. Adani Capital gives, lends to the farmers. And if the banks lend to the NBFC, that will be considered part of the priority sector lending. Now, to have this transformation, support prices must go. For this, you have got to change these laws there. Now you procure. You must give a total freedom to transport everything to any place. So, to prepare for this second green revolution, I told you the first green revolution undermined the local governments. Now, second one is going to undermine the states. So, you bring in laws on a subject, it's fundamentalism. Hospital, what was that thing? Big money is struck. Same thing for labor code. You had 4 general strikes in the country. Like that, if you look at the plethora of legislations undertaken in the parliament, the least common denominator is upliftment of state rights. Then you take administration. You have the governor. I think the Kerala Plus is here too, because I may say something on governor. Governor India is not, it's a former constitutional head. In presidential system, the constitutional head is also the real power. American president, American governor. But the cabinet system, parliamentary system, there must be a formal government, the king, whatever. But the real power is in the elected the cabinet, which is accountable to the elected representatives in the parliament or in the assembly. It's a well settled matter. It's a settled matter. I don't think anybody would debate this. But look at what is happening. Tamil Nadu passes laws. The governor says, if I don't agree, I can pretend once. But Constitution has said only as soon as possible. So it is my discretion to dictate how much time is required for that. You have a governor in Kerala who writes tweets, not writes, tweets to all the population that the ministers be careful, you are ministers only at my pleasure. So anybody lowers the dignity of the governor, that pressure may be withdrawn. So took as a joke, but seriously, 2 days later, a letter to the CM, the Kerala finance minister, have lost the pressure, so take appropriate action. Chief Minister wrote to him, I have full pressure on him. That's the matter. Nothing can be done here. You cannot discuss. But the fact somebody does all this abuse. Now, Constitution doesn't say governor is the chancellor. That status is given to him through a legislation in the assembly. So the assembly that legislated the chancellorship to the government can also withdraw it. So here is a governor who says, I will sign that. I will send it to the president. See, never has this happened, you see. There is some decorum in dealing with each other. Even your political opponents in the past also there were problems and so on. Kerala government in 1959 was dismissed, but during there was a civility in discourse. So, whole scenery is changing. Why? Because for the first time in the history of the country, we are having a government that doesn't believe in the diversity of India. You want to homogenize the nations. One nation, one culture, one nation, one law, one tax, one nation, one election, one nation, one language, homogenize. So once you have that ideology itself, then every opportunity is made to undermine the federal system that exists. It's a terrible situation. And local governments, nobody discussed that. Except for Kerala. But I think, I want to stick to time. I will not elaborate too much. But how do you address this? With all respect to you, there must be political responsibility here. Because it's a political act that is being taken, it has to be defended politically. Federalism has to become a major issue of national discourse. I will stop there. I will not elaborate further. 2, at the state level, now Tamil Nadu says so, Dravidian model of development, fine, okay. Kerala will speak out to Kerala model of development. You develop alternatives within the federal system that is possible of different parts of it. Kerala chose a path of development which focused upon human resources and paid dividends. Now we want to focus upon building our infrastructure, so we have a system of financing that. The nation must reflect regional aspirations. It's very, very important. And I think perfection is possible at the local level. Something has happened. What is that? One, I told you LC Jain spoke about the 11th Finance Commission and length the discussion and so on. Since then, the various finance commissions, every finance commission has increased their allocation for local government. Something positive in this gloomy atmosphere. And 10 finance commission, 4,400. 11, 10,000. 12, 25,000. 13, 76,000. 14, 1.25 lakh. And 15, 4.36 lakhs. I told you about referred to about Manishangayyar committee. At this time, how we move around, get the system to tick again. So we said, Finance Commission, that was then only 76,000 crores rupees. That anyway, local governments are getting. You have the engineering ideas. In fact, LC Jain has an article in the PW when NREGS law was passed, how it should be even further linked with the local governments. So now, though not by design and so on, but now local governments have a big say in NREGS, and that's a substantial amount. And whatever little they get from state. So you have a kitty of autonomous fund, untied fund as called, with which you grow local plans. You assert how our village school, LC Jain has an article, was who enthused to buy Madhya Pradesh education guarantee scheme. Let's say any panchayat, just after Sanjita said before constitutional amendment, any panchayat gives some open space for a building, government will build the building and also provide a teacher. And he has documented how girls are coming to study, how it's changing and so on. So now the local governments can decide how our school will run, how our healthcare should run. We'll take a leaf from even grass without roots. He speaks about experiments which have roots also in that book. Or you take the city of hope in Faridabad, how it can be done with this money. So he said, maximum thing like a comprehensive plan, government gives money. But that is not right. But this is the real. Therefore, let's have a minimal planning. A minimal autonomous space for action. That's a not political agitation at all. You have practical intervention at state level and local level to build alternatives. I think that is the fight for federalism. So I'm very happy I have been given this opportunity to give this lecture in memory of LC Jain, and I have tried to link the whole experience in India through his vision. Many years not have been a voluminous writer like you, but sufficient has been written and that provides a viewpoint on, I think, the tensions that have risen between center, state, and local governments, and various attempts to negotiate perhaps stop by putting forward my 3-point program. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Azad. I think you more than amply justified my calling you an academic, so thank you very much. By referring to papers written by Mr. LC Jain and quoting from them, I had a list here, but I did not go into that because I thought, so you have done that, that's wonderful. All I would say is that when you said that there has to be a political response to it, and let me quote what you said, federalism has to become a topic of national discourse. I think this lecture is a small attempt exactly in that direction, to make federalism a topic of national discourse. With that, I thank you again. And it is now my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Justice TS Thakur, former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of India. He was the 43rd Chief Justice. And I would not go into his legal career in the sense when he registered as an advocate, when he became a senior advocate, when he became a High Court judge. I will leave that aside. I will only mention a few of his judgments, which I think are worth pointing out. One of the judgments that he gave was against meat ban during a Jain festival. And since we are here in the memory of Mr. LC Jain, I thought this might be appropriate. And in that judgment, apparently he wrote that meat bans cannot be, quote, shoved down someone's throat, unquote. And he quoted Kabir. And he said, or he wrote, the poet Kabir said, why do you peek into the homes of those who use meat? Let them do what they do, but why are you so bothered about them, brother? Unquote from Kabir, and quote from Justice Thakur continues, you see, there should be an amount of tolerance and sensitivity to the other communities also, end of quotation. Then, since we had a difficult time in the World Cup, so let me also refer to a judgment in the BCCI case, where he said that no office bearer of the Board of Control of Cricket in India should have any commercial interest in cricket. This signaled a complete restructuring of the Indian cricket administration, and he classified, or the judgment classified, the BCCI job as a public function. Of course, a lot of things followed, but the judgment was the start of this. Then there was a judgment in the action against drug menace. In 2012, a bench headed by him ordered an official operation to trace the data of narcotics confiscated in the last 10 years. This was the first official exercise to find out what happens to the confiscated drugs. And the finding was that out of the 51.4 lakh kilograms of narcotics confiscated over 10 years, only 16 lakh kilograms were destroyed. Obviously, it doesn't tell us where did the rest go. Then, again, a very humanitarian judgment on compensation to victims of crime. And the judgment said that when the accused is unable to pay the required compensation to the victim or his or her family, then the state government should pay the same compensation as ordered by the court. And lastly, I found a judgment on those joining the police force to be of great interest to me and to the ADR. The judgment said that those interested in joining the police force should be strictly inspected so so that anybody involved in any criminal case can now join the police force even if he or she has been acquitted. And this is a quote from the admitted candidate: to be recruited to the police force service must be worthy of confidence and must be a person of utmost rectitude and must have impeccable character and integrity. A person having criminal antecedents will not fit in this category, unquote. Although Dr. Isaac had said we should not be doing any political talk here, but I wish this requirement applied to members of our legislature and parliament also. So with this, it is my real pleasure to invite Justice Thakur to give us concluding remarks. Please.
Professor Isaac was Joker, my esteemed brother, Justice Bhushan, Mrs. Jain, Qureshi Sir, and members of the distinguished audience. When Srinivasan invited me to chair this memorial lecture, I thought the only reason why I have been asked to do that was that I'm a good listener. I never thought that I would be asked to speak, and judges usually are very bad public speakers. They're usually heard through their judgments, and Mr. Joker could have finished with the program quoting some of my judgments through which I have spoken. But having been called upon to say something, I would say that it is a matter of great pleasure and privilege for me to be here in this memorial lecture in the memory of someone whom I had an opportunity to meet and interact with. I remember years back, we were in the National Judicial Academy at Bhopal. We had distinguished people from different fields are invited to speak to High Court judges. I happened to be there to preside over one of those sessions when Mr. Jain was invited to address. Srinivasan accompanied him. He appeared to be a little fragile in health at that time, so it appears that he was there to escort him and help him. Even in that fragile state of health, I found him to be a brilliant mind, a Gandhian by conviction, and a great reformer. I believe he was a freedom fighter. We heard him with rapt attention. And judges of the High Court, which is a very senior class of people, were all praised for his erudition. This happens to be, I believe, the fifth lecture in the series, and the Association for Democratic Reforms and the two illustrious sons of Mr. Jain deserve to be complimented for continuing this over the years. I know such like lectures, a certain amount of fatigue sets in over a period of time. But with Mr. Joker and people who are successful in their own fields like Gopal and Srinivasan, this will continue for a long, long time. Maybe it will be continued even by the next generation. I must at this stage say that I'm a great admirer of both Gopal and Srinivasan for different reasons, of course. Gopal is a very articulate, very clear-headed, very sharp mind. It's a pleasure to hear him in the court, and I keep hearing him as an arbitrator where he appears very often. If you want to get the best out of him, you have simply to provoke him. Needle him a little and he will clear up, and that brings the best out of him. But Srinivasan, I admire for a very detached way of presenting a subject. We all know television debates these days are more, irritating than educating. Srinivasan has the ability to maintain that detachment and that equilibrium which is required of a good anchor. I've hardly ever seen him catch hold of somebody, abuse somebody, or show any disrespect to somebody. There are people you all know who are all the time shouting, all the time. I can understand media is not supposed to respect people, but to be disrespectful is something that is most absurd. And therefore, the kind of people who get invited to these debates, I think somehow become very thick-skinned over these kind of criticisms. One program which I hardly ever miss is anchored by Srinivasan, and I think he has raised the level of journalism to so high that it will be difficult for others to match it. Having said that, today's subject about tensions, state-state and state-center relationship tensions is a very, I would say, a very old and very difficult subject. Federalism and the tensions between the state and the central government have been the subject matter of debates, discussions, articles, books, and some of them have appeared even in judgments. But let us remember that federalism has been universally, and I think I was myself an author of one of the 9-judge judgment where we declared it to be a basic feature of the Indian Constitution. The diversity about which Professor Isaac spoke, and the historical background in which the states came together to constitute a united country, proceeded on the basis that the diversities and the regional aspirations will find expression in giving them legislative and administrative powers. Now, what happens in practice is that if there is a law which impinges upon the state's legislative field, you have a remedy. And the remedy is you go to the court, question the legislative competence of the parliament and say this subject falls in state list and you have no business to legislate. I'm sure such a plea, once raised, has to be gone into and the courts would certainly go into. But I think the problem lies slightly in a different area, and that area is where instead of a spirit of accommodation and spirit of tolerance for dissent, spirit of seeing the system as a whole, there is a sense of intolerance to dissent, or intolerance to a contrary point of view. Not necessarily dissent in the sense that you are saying something that is anti-national against the interests of the public. That area, I think, requires a spirit of mutual accommodation for resolving the conflict. But should that not happen, the only remedy forward would be enlightening the electorate, which I think the media can do. But if an enlightened electorate also is unable to reverse the process, then perhaps the judicial intervention may be the only option. When we talk of judicial intervention, see, the independence of judiciary itself is one of those basic features. And a powerful government in the center, a government which has its own agenda, may at times bulldoze its issues, its agenda, even contrary to the common beliefs and themes. There have been issues regarding independence of judiciary, there have been issues regarding appointment of judges. Every day you will read somebody saying the collegium system is not the right system. Nobody can possibly say that the collegium system of appointment judges is the most perfect system. Well, the collegium system can itself be improved, as the Chief Justice recently mentioned. There may be reforms within the system. The collegium system, while it is still there, may itself be improved. But if you have a better system, surely try that also. I don't think anyone can possibly argue against an attempt to improve the system. Of course, you brought in constitutional amendment. You wanted to bring in a judicial commission for appointment of judges. It was tested in the court. The court found that it compromises the independence of judiciary. What you have tried to bring in is not ideal for the country, is not ideal for maintaining the independence of judiciary. So it was struck down. But that doesn't mean that if there is another opportunity, or if there is another way of doing the very same thing, please do it by all means. Instead of simply criticizing the system without coming with an alternative, doesn't lead us anywhere. So these are issues, whether it is protecting federalism, or whether it is protecting fundamental rights, or whether it is protecting the secular credentials of the country. These are aspects which can be eventually taken care of only by an independent judiciary. And that is where I think the role of judiciary and the media assumes great importance. Media, because it can enlighten the electorate, because it can open a debate, a public debate on issues that concern the well-being of the society, as Professor said, that the discourse must be national. But today, with 30% of our population below the poverty line, with illiteracy, with the entire system being divided in caste lines, with parties trying to polarize the society on the basis of religion and all, how far will that discourse eventually lead to any result is very, very doubtful. So I think while the media can continue enlightening people, continue to create an atmosphere, continue to promote a discourse so as to bring these issues up and let the people know what is right and wrong and decide eventually as to whether they should vote in a party that helps federalism or destroys federalism. The ultimate remedy, I think, will not be just media or electorate. I think the ultimate remedy will be only from the judiciary. The judiciary itself may be subject matter of great criticism for various failings that we have. Our inability to deal with the cases that are piling up in crores, the time it takes to decide matters, all that. But so long as there is an independent judiciary, and so long as the judges live up to the oath that they are administered, I'm sure whether it is the issue of federalism or fundamental rights or the independence of judiciary itself, it can take care of it. I'm so thankful to Professor Thakur and Sinua Srinivasan and Gopal for having invited me here. This has been a great opportunity to be among you. I can see the distinguished faces here who are from the field of law and economics both, apart from people from the media. This has been a feast for me, I would say, an intellectual feast, especially hearing Professor Isaac. I remember my father was also the finance minister for the state of Jammu and Kashmir for over 10-12 years. And I would often see him writing his own budget speeches. Once I asked him, why do you have to do this? He said, you know, the usual course has been that the finance secretary brings the draft. And there have been finance ministers who perhaps cannot add a line here or a word there. They will simply read out whatever the bureaucrat has brought up to you. But unless whatever is written is from the heart and I can possibly connect myself with that, I will not be able to read. I have to justify what I say and therefore I must draft my speeches myself. I'm sure Dr. Newton must be, Isaac must be, I call him Isaac Newton now. He must be one of those finance ministers who must be writing his budget speeches himself. I wish each state in this country had an enlightened and a competent finance minister as we have in Professor Isaac. It's a great feast for me, Professor Sir, to have heard you. I know you trace the history of the cooperative movement in the country, the contribution which Professor Jain made, and ultimately the challenges that you formulated in the matter of relationship between the state and the center. These are perennial. I think in a functional, vibrant democracy like ours, these are not something which should kind of pull us down. These are things that are bound to happen. And this only shows that you are alive to such issues being raised. The fact that you can, in a club like this, constitutional club like this, speak your heart out, express dissent without being persecuted, by itself I think is a great relief. And since Professor has done that, I would say that it's a matter of great privilege to have heard him. And these speeches which are being delivered by distinguished people, I think they can be compiled and eventually brought out as a book so that they remain a record for all times to come. Thank you very much and God bless you.
Thank you, Justice Thakur. I think in the true tradition of saying a lot in as few words as possible, Justice Thakur has actually said a lot of things, some of which I want to just recount. Intolerance of dissent, spirit of mutual accommodation, enlightening the illiterate, independence of the judiciary, and the role of the media. And after having praised Srinivasan Jain to great heights, he made rather informed comments on the state of the media. Thank you very much, sir. And with that, I would like to thank all of you for being here this evening to honor the memory of Mr. LC Jain. We promise to do that in future too. Thank you very much and you have a good evening.